Well, what's up, everybody? The Greatness Coach Chris Johnson here, bringing you another episode of the Pastor Plus podcast. And listen, I'm excited. My good friend, all the way in Michigan, I think Benton Harbor, Michigan, my good friend, Pastor Carlton Lynch, is with me. Pastor, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Bishop. How are you, sir?
Man, I'm
Oh, I'm
good.
sorry. I'm gonna call you Coach on this, not Bishop. Coach.
Man, Bishop Coach, I think that kind of it kind of helps my argument in what Pastor Plus is anyway. So, uh,
Right.
man, I appreciate you coming on and spending a little time with me today, man.
Always.
So I really like unpacking this concept of Pastor Plus, this idea that pastors have to have more than just a pulpit skill set. And I believe you're a living and a walking example of that. Having to create a new skill set, having to walk in some new levels of creativity. Let's first of all build this foundation. Tell us about your church, your ministry, what it is you're doing, and then we can kind of talk about how you've had to adjust your skills here.
Well, first, man, thank you for the opportunity to hang out with you. I always love our dialogue. We've been friends for a long time now. I would imagine probably 14 to 15 years, somewhere in there.
Yep.
Always figure it out by how old CJ is, because he was a little boy when we first had the opportunity to meet there in Mercerboro. And let me say, before I talk about my church, let me just say I honor all the things that you do to really keep us connected and understanding that these type of conversations are going to help us develop and be stronger leaders. So let me thank you for that. I pastor in Benton Harbor, Michigan, Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church. Let me just emphasize that because you left us.
I'm still Baptist at heart.
Yeah, sorry. And years ago when we first met, we were just excited to have a building, and so I pastor here. I just celebrated 4 years of
Wow.
pastoral leadership here at this church. Been here since 2016, and we're one church in two locations. We operate a community resource building where currently we are providing COVID testing, and in the next 2 weeks we'll be doing vaccines
Wow.
as well through the state of Michigan. We're renting space out, leasing space rather, out to the governor's office, and they're occupying the space and making this available to the community. We also house a Christian education center where we do most of our educational training. And so that's well. And then with our main location, our church is community based. We're in the heart of the city. We're on the front line with anything that goes on in our community. We try to be the first to respond. And it's been a blessing to be able to lead in this season. I think that anytime a pastor is chosen to lead, anytime there's turmoil and tragedy, that says something about that pastor. So I'm excited and I'm privileged and honored to be a part of the Lord's team during this season.
Man, I was listening to all of the things that you've been able to accomplish and your church family has been able to accomplish. And, all of the partnerships that you're making in your community, all of the transactions and all of the I guess, deals that you're making behind closed doors, that kind of bespeaks the idea that, as a pastor, it's kind of, the role of a pastor is really, really beginning to transform into meaning something different. There used to be a time when all the pastor has to do, I remember my dad was a pastor. The old school pastor just had the 3 points in a poem, Doc, just preach. And but now I'm thinking about all the different people you've had to meet, all of the different conversations you've had to have. As we look at the future of pastoring and even what's already upon us now, how do you feel like the role, the responsibility, the skill set of a pastor is shifting?
Well, we can just talk about me and your relationship. There was days where we spent hours on the phone
Yeah.
just talking about sermons. We never, at the beginning, we never had to talk about community and really shifting. As you said, your dad's a pastor, and I remember the days we used to talk about Bishop and who he was as a pastor and as a man and as a father.
Yeah.
And so the whole responsibility of the pastor has shifted without our permission.
Wow.
I think that many times we're okay with the shift, we're okay with the change, at least if we can be in control of it. But I think that we are in a place now that this is the time where we became the assistant pastor and God is the pastor,
My God.
and saying that this is the way we're going to do it now.
Yeah.
And so for me, it hasn't been much. The only thing that I would say, Chris, that has uh, allowed me that I have to go with the shift is because of the cameras. I'm getting tired of Zooms. I'm getting tired of StreamYard. But when it relates to community and helping people and being there for people and walking them through change, that's my DNA.
Yeah.
So I remember when the pandemic first started, you were one of the ones that I called first to help me with StreamYard and Be Live and these different things. And so for me, it has been difficult getting our church accustomed to it, but not so much me as the pastor because I love a challenge. And
Yeah.
so, and when you're like me and you, we wake up for something new. You know,
Most definitely.
some guys, um, and still with the COVID-19 going on and all these different changes, there's still a lot of pastors that's doing nothing but the same. You know, and the reality is, I feel sorry because there are gonna probably be more people that's going to watch service from home than ever will come back because it's been over a year now and people have gotten stuck in their habit. So for me, right now, our church, we stream live on Facebook, YouTube, and 105.3 FM.
Wow.
So we're on the radio at prime time at 11 a.m. R&B goes off at 10 o'clock. And then gospel music from 10 to 11, and then here come me. My prayer was that R&B go off at 11. So
Wow.
right after they bump and grind, after Chris Brown, the next voice they hear is "Turn with Me Too."
That's critical, man, because as I look at, I hear so many stories, and I get a lot of pastors reach out to me, having heard that I'm doing Pastor Plus and talking about what they can do outside of the pulpit. Man, we've been back in church. I know every state is different, every city is different, but we've been back in church since January, and man, it's wall to wall. Like I know people are saying, like, that hadn't been ours. People want to go to church, and like we're getting people who their churches are closed, but they want to be in church. They're just coming to our church. Now, what has shocked me has been I've been seeing pastors. I'm averaging 2 to 3 pastors a Sunday coming to church. And the story is, I lost my church or I resigned because I guess the church folded or they couldn't make the adjustment. What would you say to that pastor who's sitting there saying, we're just going to wait this thing out, or when we try to come back to have church, we're just going to go back to doing it the same way we were doing it? What would you say to that pastor to say that's just trying to fight the change, so to speak?
Let me tell you all that's listening and viewing that Chris has been doing the same thing for years. He always tried to put me in compromising situations. Yeah, this right here is a setup because he want me to answer for him. But I'll say this for pastors, and I've said this on different platforms, when I believe that God is doing a new thing.
Yeah.
And I believe that he's sovereign. meaning he's in control.
Yeah.
I believe that if God didn't want this to be so, I believe that I believe in the permissive will of God. Let me say that, where God will permit certain things to happen. I don't believe that we're going back. I believe that we serve a forward God. God is in right now and in our tomorrow. God, He is the same yesterday. That's in His DNA. That's in His attributes. That He's loving. That He's a God of peace. He's a God of joy. But when it relates to getting the gospel out, it amazes me that pastors that have spoke like that have been some of the same ones that said that we're not changing the message, we're just changing the method.
Yeah.
We've been hearing that, Johnson, from days when we started going door to door, knocking on doors, inviting people to church.
Yeah, man.
So as time progresses, things are going to continue to change. And when you begin to look at the world, you'll see airlines coming together because they wasn't able to make it on their own.
Wow.
You can ride down the street and see businesses that was flourishing before the pandemic. Now you see wood all on the windows and the doors, which really suggests everybody is not going to make the cut, right?
Wow.
So I believe this, and I'm gonna say this for those, and I'm not just saying it because you're on. I remember when you first started this at Zion, and I'm gonna tell you all, Chris was like, he was over the top, right? I mean, we were young, right?
Yeah.
And 20 people come and we think we was doing something. And Chris, before he even got members like it is now in Murfreesboro, Chris had big old binders of information. I mean, he had literature on how to sweep the floor. You don't rush through it. You gotta go right. You know? So he laughing because it was like whatever I needed some literature on, he had it, and I didn't do no work. I just cut and paste, put my logo on the top of it, and so. And I said that to say this, Chris. Churches that were not providing discipleship,
My God.
prior to COVID are struggling.
Wow, man.
See, this day and age, I know we're fascinated by the churches that's bumping and dancing and all of that type of stuff. But listen, if your church have not been able to give the members a diet, you know, a food, you hear me? And they have not discipled, you know, I don't have to beg anybody from my church, Chris, to pay their tithes and offering.
Wow.
They've been discipled. They've been trained and taught that. I just did a blast before I came on with you for those to meet me on Facebook, YouTube, and the radio tonight for Bible study. They're coming on because they understand the pastor's voice. So a lot of pastors that may be struggling, you have to ask yourself, what was I doing February of 2020?
Ooh. My God. Prior to all of this.
Yeah, we can't blame everything on COVID now.
And I've watched you throughout this, man. Let me commend you, man. I've watched you. I've seen you walking on streets with a camera. It's like you kept doing what you were doing. You just found a different way to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's like, and I don't think people really understand how challenging this has been for the pastor that loves to connect with his people. You know what I'm saying? Like, and for you to say, okay, well, I'm still the community guy. I'm still the street pastor. So let me find a way to do that. I saw you giving away groceries and clothes, and now you said we got to stream it. So I'm gonna bring the cameras with me. Had your mask on. Yeah. I saw, man. I'm watching you preach in an empty sanctuary, and I know every pastor is doing it, but not every pastor has been consistent doing it. Yeah. And from day one, when we went quarantine, I've watched you, man. And so, before we go to another segment, can you just kind of talk about what has been your mental challenges, your emotional challenges kind of walking through this season?
Yeah, I have to admit, um, this season has caused me to think more. uh, which usually me as a pastor, I'm a visionary, not an administrator. But sometimes the vision can be so clean that administratively it can just work on its own.
Wow.
You get what I'm saying, Chris?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
sometimes when you throw the right vision out to the people, they just catch it and they run with it,
yeah, man.
and it don't really take a whole lot of planning. When they know your heart, when they know how you operate, but because we're in a season we never been before, it's caused me to put my administrative cap on too, which means I have to be more strategic, and I have to plan it out a little bit more. How I can usually just talk to you to 2 o'clock in the morning with an idea, and 9 o'clock in the morning I release it. Now I can't do that.
Yeah.
So that's caused me some personal growth and development, and it also has brought about a toll on my body. When the mind, as the pastor, thinks so much, um, you can be sleep but not rested. And there's been about a lot of stress that has come along with COVID 19 and going through this pandemic, as well, because the heart of the pastor
Yeah,
is
man.
really to keep everybody. At the end of the day, is to keep everybody together. That's the heart of the pastor.
Yeah,
I
man.
mean, Johnson. 20 years ago we ain't had no money. You know what I mean? So it ain't money now. It ain't. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right.
So we living better than we ever have in our lives. So it's not money. We're really just trying to keep the people together and keep the church together. And I said this yesterday to a couple of our members. Man, Johnson, I love my kids, as you know. At my church, I spend time with my kids and my children, and I was like, wow, there's some kids, Johnson, I haven't seen in over a year.
Wow, man.
You see what I'm saying? So the problem that we have, Johnson, you're not going through it. And let me say this, because there's some people that's listening now, that they are, depending on where you are in the country, it can bring about different challenges. When you think about Murfreesboro, Tennessee, when you think about Chattanooga, Atlanta, Dallas, you're talking about the Bible Belt,
Yeah,
right?
man.
And so where people are, I was talking to a pastor in Huntsville, Alabama the other day, talking about, man, I'm going to have to go to 3 services because people just keep coming. But here in Michigan, I don't need 2 locations because I'm trying to get them to come to 1. Location has a lot to do with everything.
Most definitely. Most definitely. And it's so critical you say that because as you're looking at the challenges pastors face, I was talking to a pastor the other day, 67 years old, been serving at a church for 27 years, and he quit. Just quit, man. Said I can't do it anymore. And now he's looking at what next. I've been when I wrote in my book Pastor Plus, and I talked about every pastor at some point, whether it's by age or by circumstance, is going to come to grips with these 2 questions: what else, and what next? So you're going to have to answer those questions sooner or later, And I talked about how my dad, in the last 2 years of his ministry, he didn't even want to pastor anymore, but he couldn't do anything else. And so that's going to lead me into, what I want to kind of really talk about next is having something else. And I'm looking at your website. And by the way, everybody, I'm on the podcast today with my good friend, Pastor Carlton Lynch, there in Benton Harbor, Michigan. And he's not only a pastor, but if you go to his website, carltonlynch.com, you'll see where he is also an author. And let's talk about this a little bit, man. You got a new book out entitled Try It Again. I love it. It's the blueprint for a breakthrough. I'm about to have church. So talk to me, man. Talk to me. What was the inspiration? I need to know. What inspired you to write that book?
Well, honestly, I was on my way to my spiritual father's church in Chicago, Pastor Corey Brooks.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, what am I going to preach? And so I was trying to think, as the Baptist preachers we do, like, did I preach such and such there last time? I'm trying to figure out, so I'm trying to figure out what stick, I had, and I was preaching during the pandemic. And so I've always been trying to figure out what book to write first. I think you're on your second book, or is this your first two?
I'm on my fifth.
Your fifth, see what I'm saying? That's the bishop thing. So I went and I said, I think I preached this text before, talking about Peter in the boat and fishing and all of that. And I said, I don't know what I did the last time. I can't even remember. And I said to myself, Johnson, I said, maybe I should just try it again.
Come on, man.
Because I didn't know how it went the last time when I preached the text. And as I said it, man, I really just felt God's hand uh, give me a touch of approval. And so, you know how sometimes you get a particular passage and it's just like, that's where you live,
Yeah, man.
you know? And so I begin to think about it and about this pandemic, how there's a lot of people that have an idea, they have goals, they have objectives, they have a dream, they have all this stuff in their head, but they don't, but they're not doing it because it didn't work the first time
Come on, man.
or the second time. And so that's why a lot of pastors are we having this conversation now, why a lot of pastors are at a point where they want to quit because something did not work. See, we have been pastoring for so long and it's been easy. But now God says that I'm going to see who really have been called
My
to
God.
this.
My
Now
God.
we're seeing that more pastors have a Jeremiah anointing and they went through with it all the way.
Reverend.
Meaning, Jeremiah's nickname was the weeping prophet.
Yes, sir.
And Jeremiah got frustrated during the midst of a pandemic dealing with people. That was his pandemic, was people. And he said, I'm not going back. He said, forget about what was said in chapter 1. I heard you, Lord, before I was formed in the belly of my mother's womb. You knew me, you set me apart, and then the Lord even told him, don't be afraid of the faces, but just go ahead and preach. But by chapter 20, he had enough.
Yes, sir.
And he said, I'm not going back.
I quit.
But it was the word that was like a fire that was shut up in his bone, and that made him return, that made him try it again. So Peter, in that particular text, Peter was fatigued, he was frustrated, and felt like a failure because here's the shout, Johnson. The Bible says that when Jesus shows up, Peter's tired, he's worn out. In fact, he told Jesus, he says, I've toiled all night.
All night, Reverend.
That word toil is kapeo.
Watch your voice.
In Greek, that literally means to work hard, to grow weary, even to the point of exhaustion. Peter was tired because he'd been trying all night long. Now, Johnson, I didn't put this part in the book, but I'm going to put it in the next sermon, that anybody quit after one try.
Come on, man.
When you think about this, Johnson, this was Peter's first time having a bad night.
Come on, man.
See, the problem with some of us, Jay, is that we've been too successful.
My God. My
See,
God.
we haven't had too many nights where we didn't catch anything. You ain't had too many services at Zion where somebody didn't join the church. You haven't had too many Sundays where you didn't make the budget. Now this one time where it did not work, now you are toiled. You are now kapeo. Now you done drew weary to the point of exhaustion because of one night.
Wow.
And Jesus tells to him to launch out into the deep,
Come
which
on.
means he tells him to
Try it again, Reverend. Lynch, come on, man. Don't do me like this, man. We got to stay calm and sophisticated on this podcast.
This is how we used to do, Jay, for 2 o'clock in the morning.
Try it again, Reverend. I love it, man, because, you're speaking, man, this is helping me. I feel like I'm, in some sense, back at year one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what used to work, it won't work in this season. Like, you got to try it again. You got to reload. You got to revision. And you have to rethink. And and so, man, this is so good, man. And so you outline in the book a blueprint.
Yes.
Of bounce back, trying it again. I mean, what does chapter 1 look like?
Well, chapter one deals with failure,
Ah,
because it's failure. John Maxwell writes a book entitled Failing Forward.
yeah, man.
And he says one thing about failure. I deal with a few things in the book, but one thing that sticks out that he says about failure is that failure is not irreversible.
Mm,
And a lot of people can't get it back going because you're still stuck in what didn't work.
my God.
But check this out, Jay. We have to teach people, as I do and I talk about in the book, that failure is not a person. Failure is an event. So the event may have failed,
My
but
God.
that doesn't mean
The
that
person.
you have failed. And so, but then I go on in the book and talk about that the part of the blueprint is how are you going to try it again? Because the problem with some pastors and leaders is that we keep trying it the same way.
Mm,
Now, you got to look at this, Jay, because Peter, as you know, even as fishing, I don't fish, but my dad was a fisherman.
yeah. Yeah.
And my dad always went fishing about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. It was still dark.
Yeah.
And because you know the rule is that you catch fish, the fish bite at night. So that's why Peter's fishing at night, because that's when the fish bite. But when Jesus tells him to launch out in the deep and let down your net for a drought, that wasn't at night. That was during the daytime.
Wow.
So Jesus says that if you're going to try it again, you got to know, you got to have the right timing for the launch.
Yeah.
See, a lot of people got an idea, got a dream, got a goal, got an initiative. You got all of this stuff in you, but you don't know when is the right time. Sometimes Jesus may curse or rebuke or turn you away from the time
The
that has
time.
been popular.
The timing is off,
Your timing is off.
Reverend. Reverend, man. I listen. I already ordered my copy.
I seen
Everybody,
that.
if you're watching, you need to go get the book. Try it again. This is. I believe this is a godsend because so many people need to go and launch, study, enroll, start the business again. And man, what a blessing, man, for you to share that with the world. You're not only an author, you're not only a pastor. Now let's get it. Ever since I've known you, you've been a community activist, and this is what I like about it. This is why I say you embody the pastor plus. That the totality of your ministry is not just limited to you standing up and orating every Sunday from the pulpit, but you have your hands in so much. You're itinerant, you're traveling as an author, but then, man, I've seen you go all over the country as a community activist. And one of the things we're seeing that's still so prevalent now is this police brutality that we're seeing all over the country, the injustices that we're seeing with black and brown people. So can you just share your heart about being a community activist? What keeps you up at night? What wakes you up early?
I think the fact that I'm a black man and I'm 41 years old and alive
Mm.
and have never been roughed up by the police, have never had a gun drawn on me by law enforcement. Not that I haven't done anything wrong, but to see now that so many of our black and brown brothers are literally being harassed by the police at an alarming rate. I used to preach a message on how Jesus dealt with the law, because what we're seeing now is not, Johnson, the first time that someone had to deal with the police and deal with the law. Jesus did.
Come on,
Uh,
man.
we just celebrated crucifixion and resurrection weekend. That was police brutality at a high, and we don't want to and we don't want to talk about that, how they marched him from Judgment Hall to Judgment Hall.
Come
He
on,
went
man.
to court, and they said, we find no fault in him, meaning they said not guilty. Leave outside of the courthouse, and he's grabbed by soldiers. You hear
Reverend.
me? He's
Reverend.
grabbed by the law. You hear me? And they marched him. They said, we don't care what was just done inside Jerusalem courthouse. They still crucified him as though he was guilty. And to see how they spit on him, you hear me? To see how they put their knee in his neck, you hear me?
Reverend.
To see how they really harassed him and shot him over a bottle of tea and a pack of Skittles. I'm telling you, everything that we experience now in the 21st century was done 2,000 years ago.
Reverend.
How he went to a cross as a black man, you hear me? And stood between two thieves, you hear me? And never told on them. Y'all ain't saying nothing.
Reverend.
I mean, he kept it to himself. You know, a black man, you hear me, will go to jail and not snitch. Y'all hear me? Jesus was on the cross and was still trying to help. Forgave before he died. Told death. That's what I love about black people. Black people have been forgiven, you hear me? We have let stuff go. We have moved on. We have released it for years now. For over 2,001 years, that's what we've been doing.
Wow.
And Jesus, it started with him. He said, hold on, before I die, let me forgive them. Y'all hear me? Because they don't know what they do. You hear me? Before I die, black people are into forgiving. Black folks are into taking care of their mother before he died. Remember, John, he says, listen, John, behold thy mother, mother, behold thy son.
Yeah.
Jesus took care of business, and they laughed at him. And in the shame part is, Johnson, even after you see knees and necks, and you got an officer now talking about he didn't understand, he didn't know that it was his gun, he thought it was his taser. Listen, there's people that's a laugh at us. You hear me?
That's
and
she was a female. It was a female officer.
You got a black boy dead now, and you talking about it was a mistake. So Johnson, I'm in it because I'm a gospel preacher, and I don't know, and you know I get in trouble with preachers all the time. I don't know how we can preach Jesus and not preach truth to power. I don't know how we can not talk to governors. You know, when you think about the Old Testament prophets, we keep prophesizing cars, cribs, and clothes and cash. But in the Old Testament, the prophet didn't really prophesy to individuals. They prophesied to nations, to governments.
Deal with it,
and
sir.
so forth. So I don't know how we cannot be involved. You know what I mean? John, I wish I had time. I'll read the scripture to you that really messes me up, and it calls a burden enemy, because we only like to read the part of the scripture that says, come now, let us reason together, said the Lord. But there was something that was going on before that. In fact, in Isaiah chapter 1. And that's why I do what I do, because in Isaiah chapter 1, let me just read one thing to you, Johnson.
Okay.
Verse 13 says this: quit your worship parades. I'm in the Message translation. He says, I can't stand your trivial religious games.
Wow.
Listen to what he says. Monthly conferences, weekly Sabbaths, special meetings. I can't stand one more. Meetings for this, meeting for that. I hate them. You've worn me out. I'm sick of your religion, while you go right on sinning.
Wow.
When you put on your next prayer performance, I'll be looking the other way. No matter how long or loud or often you pray, I will not be listening. Check this out, Jay. And do you know why? Because you've been tearing people into pieces, and your hands are bloody. Go home and wash up. Clean up your act. Sweep your lives clean of evil doing, so I don't have to look at them any longer. I'm done, Jay. Say no to wrong. Learn to do good. Work for justice. Help the down and out. Stand up for the homeless. Go to bat for the defenseless.
My God.
Now, come now, let us reason together.
Oh, we forget about all of that. How do we skip over all of that?
He says, go to bat for the defenseless. But you got preachers that say, well, I don't really get into all of the social. No, this ain't social. This life.
My God, man. My God. Man, it was Howard Thurman who says, ask not what the world needs, but as what makes you come alive, and then go do that. It seems to me that this makes you come alive, man.
Oh, man.
And we see that you're doing it, man. Listen, guys, Pastor Carlton Lynch there in Benton Harbor, Michigan, doing big things. He, in my estimation, is a pastor plus individual. He's walking in so many other roles, and I thank God for our friendship. Man, Lynch, how can everybody get at you, man? How can we connect with you? How can we, get the book? Let us know how we can get at you, man.
The best way is my website, Carlton Lynch. My name, carltonlynch.com. I'm on every social media there is, but Snapchat, because I don't want to see what my daughters are posting. But I'm on Instagram, Pastor Carlton Lynch. I'm on Facebook, 2 to 3 pages, and I'm on Clubhouse at Carlton Lynch as well. So I appreciate you, Pastor, Bishop, Coach, all of the names and what you offer to the body of Christ, to the kingdom. I think it is incredible.
Well, coming up here in June, as you just mentioned, Clubhouse, Facebook, Instagram, and all of those social media platforms. Coming up here in June, we're having a 2-day camp for pastors, helping to push them into becoming influencers, creating content, extending beyond the pulpit, finding some extra skill sets. Some pastors need help discovering that. Some pastors don't even know that you have content already, and we're going to help them pull that out and discover that. I'm bringing in a social media expert, content strategist, a publicist. I'm bringing in Pastor A.D., Adrian Davis, who's now out in California. He's operating in his plus right now and doing some big and major things. And so, man, I'm excited about it. That's June 24th and 25th, everyone. You can go to my website at cajohnson.org. Hey, this has been another episode of the Pastor Plus podcast. We've been on with the one and only Pastor Carlton Lynch there in Benton Harbor, Michigan. Pastor Lynch, man, thank you so much again for joining me today.
And I appreciate you so much, sir.
All right, everybody. Until next episode, God bless you. And remember, Pastor, don't just be a pastor. Be a pastor plus. God bless.